long weekend vibes. Is it just me or is the air getting cooler?
Oh yeah, it just literally dropped. Right here, let me just adjust. So you've got a YouTube background.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Brent.
You officially have a YouTube background. You have a bookshelf with books.
No, this is just like a green screen.
Sure. No, it isn't. So, so that's so awesome.
I wanted to put Andrus Pone's book up here, but it's like a soft cover, and it's like the hardcover books stand up nicely. So
Yeah.
we're gonna have to get a hardcover version.
Okay. So you can't just like mount, like put it up or something like that. Like just make it.
I don't have a book mount.
You need a book mount.
I guess so.
Okay. Yes, you do need a book mount. Okay, you can expense that. That's no problem.
Just as a little plug here for Andrus's book.
Of course. All right. Have you read it? How are you finding it?
I'm a third of the way through it. I'm really digging it. But there was a point in it which I had misunderstood, which was a very big and important point. And then I spoke to Andrus about it, and he's like, no, you've completely misunderstood what I was trying to say. But I don't want to give away the spoiler.
Oh, geez. Okay. So I guess we have to have him on or something like that?
Yeah, he's got to come back again.
Okay, so let's give away the spoiler. What was the point?
Well, he was talking about a very large entity and a prediction that it wouldn't exist anymore. And it still definitely exists.
Are we talking about U.S. politics here?
I mean, we can't give away the spoiler, right? We got to keep people interested.
Okay, all right. Forget that. Okay, so we got 1 minute before the show. I'm going to share a story with you. This is the story I've been cliffhanging you on for like 3 or 4 shows. Are you ready?
I'm still hanging.
Okay, so anyways, something to not do with your future spouse. You got this?
I mean, this sounds important.
Okay, very important. So anyways, last week, I was talking with Carolyn, and she was like, sometimes we say, how did you sleep last night? And she's like, I slept just terribly, like got literally 1 hour sleep. And I was like, you didn't sleep terribly. And she's like, yeah, I slept terribly. I said, you didn't sleep terribly. I bet you that 1 hour sleep was the most excellent sleep you got. Because in contrast, it was amazing. So anyways, don't do that. Okay.
Didn't go over very well.
No, it's like, well, think about it. It's like, if you're walking through the desert and you have that real thing of water, that's probably going to be the best water you ever have in. Right? Am I right?
I mean, logically,
bro. Am I not right? Okay, I'm not right. All right, let's go into the show, everybody.
You've tuned in to COVID Marketing with Brent Kobayashi and Arthur Tutt, the show that supports small business not just to survive, but to thrive.
That's right, we are live with COVID Marketing episode number 104, coming to you week daily at 11:11 Eastern Standard Time. So if you have questions on marketing or business or, well, whatever, you let us know in the comments wherever you find fine folk are seeing this. I am Brent Kobayashi, president of Kobayashi Zeitguys, a marketing agency here in Toronto, Canada. And with me is Mr. Arthur Tutt, a marketing specialist at the KZ.
And if you're liking what you're seeing here after 104 episodes, share it with your friends, like, subscribe, hit the bell button so you never, ever miss a show.
All right. Okay. Arthur, what do you have for us today?
We got some questions to get back into. Going back to the show we did with the Toronto School of Management, we still got some repertoire.
All right. So we have questions that we have not yet answered, is what you're saying.
We
got to answer all the questions.
Barely scratching the surface. Like those students, they had a lot of questions to ask.
Okay. All right. Let's get into it.
Now, some of them are a little bit similar to what we've already gone through before, but we can come at it from a new angle here. So we're going to be diving back into, these are basically questions for Brent in how, when he was starting out, setting up his business and what that journey was like.
All right.
really coming at it from the point of view of a junior marketer starting out today. How can they get started in the industry? So, Mr. Brent, what
Yes.
was the first thing you did when you were starting out your business?
The first thing I did when I started out my business. I don't know. Tried to get sales. Okay, so I'll tell you the first thing I should have done.
Cold calling?
No, I wasn't cold calling. I was just following my nose wherever it was leading me. Okay. So let's see. The first thing I did. Okay, let's not answer that question. Let's answer the question of the first thing I should have done. Okay.
Lessons
Right?
learned.
Yeah, the lessons learned.
This
So
is the wisdom.
this is the wisdom that I think actually came like 23 years later. So 23 years later, I had run my business into the ground.
Sorry, I'm just imagining you just waking up in the middle of the night 23 years later and being like, "Oh my God, I should have done that."
Should have done this, right? Okay. So this year, one of the things we've done, we've grown, we've done all this stuff, we're really moving forward a lot, and I realized that if we're going to actually maintain what we've got and be able to grow into and be able to sustain what we've got, we have what I think of as a critical path. So when I was starting out, basically I just did anything. You asked me to do something, I do that. If there's more than I could do in a week, I just worked more and did more and then tried to hire more. Basically, do I have enough money to pay them over the next 2 weeks? And it would go like this. It would like be up and down and up and down and almost, I don't know, from people I've spoken to, fairly typical for a small business where, you know, sometimes you're just too busy. You can't do all your marketing. You can't do your sales stuff. And then you have no money because you don't have any business. And it just goes in these wacky cycles. And so what we've implemented just the last few weeks, so this is like 25 years after starting my business, I think I've got it. I think I've got it. 25 years it took for this lesson to be learned. I looked at the next 4 or 5 months and I was like, what do we need to do over the next 4 or 5 months? I need a certain amount of cash flow and I need clients to be happy so they continue with us, right? A couple of things, right? So I just said, okay, well, that means I have a critical path. I actually know what needs to be achieved. And so I sat back and I thought, what stuff has to happen? So we need to hit all of our production milestones. We need to sell this amount of business, like this amount of stuff. So what are the things that are going to do those things? And then after figuring that out, like, so we need to sell this much, we need to implement this marketing plan, we need to implement this advertising plan, we need to have these clients be super happy with what we're delivering so then they renew or re-up. Like there's just a bunch of, you know, just listed down a whole bunch of things and then really thought through what does that mean as far as this critical path and focus for the fall. We call it the fall focus. This is what I should have been doing way back when, which is actually think of what do I absolutely need? And therefore, what steps am I going to, what am I going to focus on? Just we'll call it 3 months, 4 months. I wouldn't go much longer than that. And then from there, you derive exactly what you're doing each week. And the funny thing is, what would happen, and you've seen this happen with the team, Ruth was talking about this morning, there's some important and super urgent things to happen this week, right? So last week, it was one of our clients needed, we wanted to migrate their website over to our servers. That was one thing they wanted to. And another thing, we need to get all these HR documents lined up because it's actually a requirement. It's a legal requirement. We need to catch up with a couple of things as far as that goes. And these are urgent and high priority. And my answer to the team was, they're not in our critical path. So that doesn't mean you don't do them this week, but these other things that are in the critical path, you do. I said do. Sorry, I'm just sorry. I'm going to just stop there a moment and enjoy that moment.
Mic drop.
Yeah, do. We
critical path.
Each week you want to do. You want to do your do. So anyways, all right. So what it's allowed me at least, and not everybody's like this, a lot of people I know, like are really good business leaders, know how to say no. They know how to say, this isn't working. This isn't what I want. They can restructure their business in terms of their team. They can do all sorts of things. I'm more of a yes person. If somebody wants us to help them out for a few $100 and I've got this big thing over here, I will help them out. If I got this, I'll just try to shuffle things and do more and more and more and more. So what this has really supported me is this is figuring this out. And right now, at least, I'm spending like a day or half a day each week just sifting through and figuring out what gets removed and what really needs to be on this critical path just for this next week. It's a little micromanagey right now to start. And I want to let go of that after a while, but that's what I think the first thing you do when you start out is figure out actually what your critical path is, and then use that to say no to other things. Because believe me, especially if you're starting out, quite often, you maybe not want to do the critical path things. You just like, that I know that I should make my 20 sales phone calls. That's the big one everybody talks about, is the sales phone calls. But I think I'll work on this thing over here because it's either shiny, which is what I usually get. I get shiny syndrome. I'm like a crow. I'm like, ooh, that looks very cool. I want to collect that thing and do that thing. Or it's kind of like that, that feels icky. It's the frog that you don't want to eat. So it's like, just eat the damn frog because it's on your critical path.
Was that a Brian Tracy reference?
Is Brian Tracy the frog guy?
Yeah, the Eat That Frog.
Okay. Yeah, yes. Is that one of your books on your shelf, on your YouTube shelf?
It's on my to read list.
Okay, very cool. So yes, that's what I would have. That's the first thing. That's the first thing I wish I had done. I wish that were a muscle that I had built over the last 25 years.
Develop the critical path on the most important things to get done each week.
Yeah. It sounds so blah, 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 blah right now. Actually, yes, of course, do the most important things. But it's hard. Listen, at least it is for me. And that means some people out there, it's hard for them too, is saying no to those things because it just piles up. I have like a ton of stuff. Like all these things are really great to do. But if you've got a little bit of a perspective, then that's what I would recommend you do.
Prioritization. That's a life skill.
Yes. The takeaway today, folks, is prioritize. Next in our
a little
juicy
bit more
tips. Yes.
Technical for a second.
Uh-huh.
What was it that made you interested in the advertising industry specifically?
All right, we've asked and answered that. Basically, I love growth. I love the opportunity. I love the possibility of growing. I love the creativeness about getting attention and doing stuff like it is the most interesting part of running a business is it's not necessarily specifically advertising, but advertising is part of it. It's the marketing side of things. It's how you present yourself to the world. It's totally fascinating. All right, next.
So now it's story time.
All right.
Which has been your most difficult client to work with and why?
Most difficult client to work with and why? Jeez.
They've all been amazing.
No, that's not true. I don't know. They weren't necessarily the most difficult. So there was a client where the job just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And the client was unhappy and unhappier and unhappier and unhappier. And part of the reason why was that the job itself was somewhat reliant on a third party, or majorly reliant on a third party to provide some stuff. And nobody understood what we were getting into. Nobody understood it. And so there's two reasons why it got challenging. One was early on when the scope was changing dramatically, I was too scared to put the brakes on it and saying, this is totally not what our agreement was. And I want it to work. And so kept on taking more and more and more responsibility for the whole thing, which in and of itself was fine. But if I weren't so scared to let that job go, I would have been talking with the client a little bit differently, as in, this doesn't work, this is what you need, or this is what it's going to cost, or this is what we could do, or even, we're not quite sure what to do, but this is how we'd approach it. Maybe you should be doing it differently, which might not include us. And so we just kept on being pulled forward inch by inch by our own volition. Like we chose this, right? So one was not resetting or setting expectations right from the beginning. So then a year and a half later, as it just kept going and going and going, and I was like, geez, I'm working for like 50%, and it was just not feeling good. And I think I relayed this as one of my biggest mistakes. I actually said, this is stopping, when we were actually quite close to the end. And in tens and tens and lots of money, I think by my nope, this is the way it's going to be approach, at the very end, like the last 5%, and the last 5% was like 6 months, right? That last 5% basically turned it from, we've got your back with the client, to oh, okay, you don't have our back. And so they, of course, needed to just finish off what we were doing and then move on without us, which might have been the right decision anyways for us and for them, but it wasn't. Let's put it this way. I did not clearly have in my mind the concept of sunk costs, because emotionally I got wrapped up in it. So once I was emotionally wrapped up in it, then I was not looking at it from this point forward. It just felt unfair. And every time something feels unfair, look at it and say, from this point, never mind history, forward, what's the right decision for me? And of course, what's the right decision for the client? That doesn't mean you from this point forward, this is how we would do it differently, or I want things to change, all that kind of stuff. But the change didn't mean anything. The change just meant finally I got my way with something I've been kind of upset about for months and months, and maybe even a year. So it was a purely emotional decision. It had nothing to do with either really what would serve us best or what would serve the client. Right? So that was the most difficult situation to be with. Now, as far as being the most difficult client to deal with, not necessarily. But one thing I do believe with all clients, and you haven't heard me say this, I don't think, but I always talk about profit through process, not punishment. Meaning, when you have a client, and if it's a difficult situation, then as a professional, as a company, what you want to do with that is learn. Either learn how to set boundaries and set things on course, learn how to say, it could be, like I said at the beginning of this thing, this isn't working out. No harm, no foul. It's just not working out. This is how I could see us moving forward, whatever that happens to be. It could be our rates have to triple because this is what's going on here, but it's process. It's not punishment. So in other words, when you get into that kind of, I need to get fairness and justice and all that kind of stuff, that's not a business anymore. That's just, you're losing sight of a lot of what could possibly, you're losing sight of the opportunity you have yourself to learn. So when you go through a process of figuring out, how is it that this is failing? Is it that somehow we weren't able to articulate exactly what we're doing for this particular client? Is it somehow we didn't go through and set expectations? Is it that something changed on the client's end and we're not responding to it? Right? So sometimes clients, they do have buyer's remorse, and then, the way they communicate it comes across differently, as in, you're cheating me or something else like that. That's not happened really very often in the last 25 years, but sometimes we've had people that have been upset with us. And in those situations, in all situations, you want to figure out, what's my process? What are my lessons learned? What are my expectations? What questions can I ask so that this isn't going to be a situation next time? What questions can I ask so I can fully understand what would make the client happy, including, hey, shall we just end? And it may be, you know what? I'm sorry, I'm going to keep my deposit, and we might we might disagree. Let's put it that way. But in most cases, if you want to be converting, always be converting, ABC, you want to figure out how do you set it up so that a year or 2 years or 5 years from now, that person might be like, you know what, that guy was there for me when I was going through a tough time. Mm-hmm. Because that's all that's happening. Back. Yeah, had my back. Mm-hmm. And by going through a tough time, it might have been, I was so super stressed over here that I kind of took it out on these guys. But somehow I started with that, and then they kind of made it good for me. And I wasn't happy with it, but they might even feel righteous. Yes, I got my money back because they weren't doing their job. But they just made it work for me. So believe it or not, bad clients 2 years from now might be great clients, because they're just not in that human experience that they were in the middle of at that time.
And just to wrap up one last point, I think you hit on something really important there, which is a reframing that whenever you have a difficult situation, and you might perceive it as a bit of a loss, to look at that another way and look at that as in, like, it was an investment in learning. It was an investment in learning how to do it better next time.
100%. In fact, as soon as you turn it to that, then you've now won. Straight down, you've now won. You've learned something. And believe me, they talk about make all your mistakes when you're in your early 20s. It's because the consequences aren't that much. So every time you make a mistake, the consequences are less making the mistake now, or having that thing happen now, or learning that lesson now, than if you make it, when you're 30 or 40 years down the road, because you have less learning time to capitalize on, or less time to capitalize on whatever happened there. So always, at every moment in your life, even when you're 90, you'll be like, great, I'm glad I did this now, or glad this happened now, because now I've learned from it so I can put it into play when I'm 91. All right?
Bingo.
You got a meeting now.
Wrap that up smoothly.
All right, so let's wrap this up.
You've tuned in to COVID Marketing with Brent Kobayashi and Arthur Tutt, the show that supports small business not just to survive, but to thrive.
That's right. Thank you so much for joining us on COVID Marketing episode number 104, where we got into some of the lessons learned in the past 25 years, of which we're implementing in the 25th year. So thank you so much very much for joining us. Tomorrow, on our show, we have our guest entrepreneur, Bisa Dobson. It's going to be a Kill the Guru show. She's a registered massage therapist. And we have special guest, Elan Marco, business coach. He's going to take Bisa and us through 100K in 100 minutes in like 20 minutes. So it's like, whoa, like big time stuff. So Elan's going to be joining us. Bisa's going to be joining us. And she is going to get the opportunity to become her own guru. Can't wait to see you guys tomorrow. It's going to be a good one.
Smooth.
Let's
cut it.